Namaste, hello, and welcome to India Global Week 2020, Be the Revival, India and a Better New World. I'm your host, Priyanka Deo, reporting from New Delhi, India, and I'm super excited because we have registered attendees from over 50 countries. I believe it's 52, if not more. That was a stat this morning. Thank you all for joining us. Very glad that you're here. Hope you're enjoying yourselves. Follow us on India Inc. Corp throughout India Global Week to be in touch with the sessions, the panelists, and our fabulous guests. That's India Inc. Corp, India INCORP. That being said, under the Narendra Modi government, the India-US defense relationship has emerged as a major pillar of India-US strategic partnerships with defense, trade, joint exercises, personal exchanges, and cooperation in maritime strategy, security, and counter-piracy. In fact, India conducts more bilateral exercises with the US than ever. What is the current status of the India-US defense relationship? Are there any recommendations on how to bolster this relationship further, especially after COVID? Let's hear from our expert panel in this discussion, the United States and India, unlocking the full potential of major defense partner. If you're taking screen shares, posting on social media, if you have any questions or thoughts that you'd like to share with us, use the hashtag #BeTheRevival. I'll be tracking it and hopefully we can get to some of your questions and concerns. Now, this session is sponsored by India Inc. and presented by the US-India Strategic Partnership Forum, or the USISPF. The US-India Strategic Forum is a nonprofit organization with the primary objective of strengthening the US-India bilateral and strategic relationship and partnership. I now give it to the moderator of this session, Mr. Vikram Singh, who is the Senior Advisor for Defense and Aerospace at the US-India Strategic Partnership Forum, to introduce the panel and begin the discussion. Vikram, the floor is yours.
Thanks so much, and thank you, India Inc. and USISPF, for bringing everyone together in these unprecedented times to talk about critical issues that don't stop, even though we take a break to try to manage a global pandemic. I'm really honored to have this discussion about the full potential of the major defense partnership. If there's one thing that doesn't really need a revival, it's US-India defense cooperation, because it has really been going from strength to strength for 20 years, and it looks like that trajectory is set to continue. But it is a complicated relationship, and we're really honored to have a terrific group of speakers today to look at the geopolitical, the bilateral, and the commercial aspects of what is becoming the most consequential defense relationship of the 21st century. I'm joined today by Joe Felter, the William J. Perry Fellow at Stanford Center for International Security and Cooperation. Professor Dr. Felter is also the former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for South and Southeast Asia, and brings years and years of experience working on building this relationship. Also, Dr. Harinder Sekhon, who is Senior Foreign Policy and Strategic Advisor to the Vivekananda International Foundation. We also have Bill Blair, who's Vice President, CEO of Lockheed Martin in India. Salil Gupte, who's President of Boeing in India. And Ravi Nagarajan, who's the Head of Aerospace and Defence for Mahindra. So it really is an amazing group that we've managed to get together here. We don't have a lot of time. So rather than go through a bunch of introductory remarks, I'm diving right into questions. And then we will have as much of a back and forth as the virtual world allows us to have. And I can't wait to see all of you in person sometime really, really soon. Harinder, I'm going to start with you because you have had roles in Indian national security over decades, including serving on the National Security Council. And of course, we're at a really interesting moment, sort of an unprecedented moment, with China and India coming to blows, resulting in fatalities for the first time in some 50 years. And we're wondering how that is going to change things in the region. India lost 20 personnel at least. We don't know Chinese casualties. The Chinese and the Indians are managing de-escalation right now. But how do you see the impact on India's handling of China and cooperation with the United States going forward after this really remarkable and tragic turn of events?
Thanks, Vikram, and thanks once again for having me on this very important panel. Getting to your question, I think US-India defense relationship has seen an uptick in the last 2 years. and we've had a lot of partnerships. And now this current standoff, we witnessed some kind of tacit US support for India even during the Doklam crisis, which was more behind the scenes. But now I think Secretary Pompeo and our foreign minister have had a very open and frank discussion, and US has committed itself to come to India's aid in any manner. Now, the way India looks at it is that while we do not look for foreign boots on the ground, there's a greater determination on the part of India to carry on with its infrastructure building, regardless of the Chinese trying to put impediments over there. And this is something which has been happening, which has irked the Chinese. So there is greater determination on the part of India to carry on with the work we are doing, and also to relook at our partners, and there the US assumes greater significance. Even before Ladakh, I think the COVID-19 pandemic had brought the two countries closer, because we were collaborating in the medical area, the supply of medicine, etc. But now I think the Quad is something which there is large appreciation for the fact that the Quad needs to be strengthened. And at one of the meetings which we had at the track 1.5 level just a week ago, it was that we really need to institutionalize, have a revolving kind of a secretariat, and come out with a joint statement rather than each country come out with separate statements. I think it's not just messaging, and I think the Indian naval role, which India was a little hesitant in the past, but I think right from the Indian Ocean to the Pacific Ocean, we need to have more effective cooperative mechanisms for joint patrol.
I think that's a really great point. The Quad is going to feature even more prominently. Joe, just building on that, the U.S. and India concluded a lot of groundbreaking agreements, things you worked on personally for a long time in the past year and a half. Everything but one, the BECA agreement, which is on geospatial intelligence, probably would be useful now, but the other ones on communications, enabling classified exchanges of information, more industrial cooperation. How do you see these elements of being major defense partners bring tangible benefits to India and for that matter, to U.S. national security and interest?
Yeah. Well, thanks, Vikram, and thanks for the chance to be here and join this esteemed panel. But no, I absolutely think these agreements are, really critical to the type of defense cooperation that we expect as major defense partners. And Vikram, just bumping it up a bit. I mean, why do we have this major defense partnership? And it's, I think we all can agree that, a strong, capable, independent India, assuming its natural place as a regional power with global influence, we all want that. India, the U.S., the whole region. And getting there is going to take cooperation. I think, as you mentioned, defense cooperation is going to really drive this relationship. And I think these enabling agreements are great examples of how to keep this defense cooperation on a great trajectory. You mentioned the COMCASA. You saw Secretary Mattis and Nirmala Sitharaman signed that back in the fall 2018. This is a great accomplishment. It took a long time to get this across the line. But it's going to allow us to transfer secure communications, data equipment to India, and really give us the opportunity to offer real-time data sharing with the Indian military over secure channels. So we won't go into too much detail because there are some sensitivities, but imagine the turnkey increases in capabilities we're going to have with this. This is like some of the panel members are familiar with, the P-8s, the C-17s, and other platforms. But we're going to be able to share information, intelligence, and early warning of activities. You can imagine the current crisis on the border, how important this is going to be. So COMCASA, a great win, if you will, in building this defense partnership. And Vikram, you mentioned this in industrial security annex. This is a we have this with our closest partners and allies in other countries in the form of the GSOMIA. But again, this is going to really help us get this industry-to-industry collaboration. It's going to help us get co-production, co-development in the defense sector, and I think really give us the better opportunities that we need to build that defense supply chain in India. Have India be a global manufacturing supplier, with U.S. products and technologies. And also, as Vikram, we've worked together on these areas before. But today, innovations that are going to shape current conflicts and future conflicts. They're going to occur in the commercial technology base, and this ISA is going to help us get at those. I think both our countries have this great entrepreneurial ecosystem, for example, but they're really disconnected from defense technology development procurement. So hopefully the ISA is going to help us get those more incentives and pathways to help with that. So yeah, we're really excited. We're on a great path. I think the BECAs are, when I left the DoD, we were close to that. So hopefully we'll get that across the line. But certainly both of these agreements I just highlighted and others are great examples of the increasing robustness and substance of what we can do as major defense partners.
Well, that's you make such a great point on the industrial cooperation. The fact is, all three of the private sector companies that we have in this meeting today have equipment being used in real time in the current conflict in Ladakh, and are integral to India's ability to secure its borders. And Salil, I wanted to turn to you to give us a bigger picture about how companies like Boeing and U.S. defense industrial leaders view international cooperation, that is really always done in support of U.S. national interests, and the growth of the industrial cooperation, the defense cooperation between our private sectors has really been probably one of the most important pillars, if not the most important pillar, of building the U.S.-India defense relationship, along with exercises and training and other exchanges. Mm-hmm. Can you tell us a little bit about how Boeing India sees its commercial role contributing to Indo-U.S. security, to bilateral cooperation, and to building a more secure future for the region?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And thank you for having me today. For us, for Boeing, this is all about building trust. And if you take a step back, what does major defense partner mean? It means that India is incredibly important to the U.S. from a national interest standpoint, and that's actually codified in U.S. law now, right? And it's a way, but it goes beyond the symbolism of that. It's left to both the defense services on both sides and then also the industry to bring that relationship and really make it real. And the way we do that is by building trust every day. And so that can be done a number of ways via our commercial industrial interests. Number one, we're of course providing platforms, whether it's our C-17 or P-8 or Chinook or Apaches, as you mentioned, being utilized today across a number of frontiers. And then it's supporting those, but then also being in the middle of what I would call the tech transfer dialogue. So for example, it's not just a one-way street. It's not just tech transfer, from the US to India. It's also the fact that companies like Boeing, we have 3,000 people in India that are innovating for India and for the world. And so there's actually a lot of innovation that's happening in India via Boeing that's going the other way, that's supporting customers around the world as well. And as we continue to have more of that happen, it's this two-way street, if you will, you're going to have that trust continue to grow. Additionally, you're going to have development, as Dr. Felter was noting, of the supply chain in India. Of course, it's companies like Boeing and other peers that we have, like Lockheed on the call today as well, that are developing suppliers in India to move up the value curve in global manufacturing for defense. As we continue to do that, that's also going to build trust. And so we play a key role, I think, in building that trust and making major defense partner reality. And those are some of the ways in which we do it.
Yeah, I think it's been pretty inspiring to see what American companies have grown to do in the defense and innovation space. Massive investments in engineering and partnerships across the board. Mahindra has partnerships with Boeing and with Lockheed on various things. And Ravi, I really wanted to turn to you because part of your job is leading the strategic partnerships for Mahindra as you had the aerospace and defense business, which is a pretty tremendous growth area for the company too. And you have partnerships, as I mentioned, with both of the companies on the call. Can you give us your views on how these partnerships are helping build India's defense and technology ecosystem and helping sort of advance that vision of India as a major contributor to the global defense ecosystem? We can't hear you, Ravi.
Yeah, so thank you, Vikram. Thank you for having me on the show. And I do have my peers and partners also on this call. So that's very, very reassuring. And I will take it from where Salil left, where he was talking of trust. I think we are two vibrant democracies, and it's important that I say this. We are vibrant democracies and we are natural partners. And while we do have to work our processes and the American side has to work its processes, eventually we are natural partners and we have to be together. I think destiny has intertwined us and we are going to be together. So all this, I remember, started, I will not go back too much. There was sort of a pause in between. But in 1997, when the two navies started exercising. So this was somewhere in the Andaman Sea. There was a small exercise. That was a prelude to what started. And by mid-2000s, I think we really got together. I think there is no looking back at this point in time. While we do have both our partners here, we really do look to grow in India. With Boeing, we have announced major programs, and with these programs, if they do come through, I think it's a great relationship where the element of trust between the two countries will essentially move forward. That being said, I must also touch upon my advent partners who are also Americans. We do have a JV with Telephonics, which is really important. And there is technology that comes in here, and there is also equipment that we export from India. And of course, under the FMS route, India has got M777 guns, which have got deployed in today's conflict in the north. These come out of our plant, not very far from our capital, which is Delhi. So our plant is located right here. These guns are put together here. They undergo testing. And after they are accepted into the army, they get transported. So our relationship has gone a long way so far. And as I look at it, only sky is the limit. The government has been very, very supportive in building this ecosystem. In the sense, they've recently announced new policies. And the best part about this policy is that it's halfway for the Indian system, and it's only halfway for the foreign OEM. When it is halfway, I think there is opportunity to meet and move forward. It is not sort of biased to the Indian domestic players, nor is it biased towards foreign side. So I think it's quite balanced, and that will also give us an opportunity. The environment is sort of very good, and the partnership is likely to grow.
Thanks, Ravi. Bill, I'm gonna turn to you. Similar question to what I was asking Ravi about the partnerships with Indian industry, how it contributes to not only delivering a specific product or capability, but to Lockheed's own view of its future, building its own capabilities, that two-way street of innovation, but also how you see what you guys are doing now really contributing to that bigger picture to support U.S. and regional national security. So Bill, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Vikram. I guess I would sum it up in two words, and I want to give some perspective on that, is foundation and future, which is tremendous. I think we've got a really strong foundation with our efforts here at Lockheed Martin. We're partnered with Todd Advanced Systems Limited since 10 years now, over 10 years, celebrating our anniversary this year on aerostructures, delivering empennages for the C-130J, which are in operation and service as we speak for the Indian Air Force. But as importantly, or maybe even more importantly from an industry perspective, it's meeting the global supply chain requirement. So we've been embracing Make in India as an initiative for over 10 years now. And now as that's getting much greater focus with the Prime Minister and even especially with the Atmanirbhar Bharat initiative, we're completely embracing that and seeing how that can grow in the future. So building on that foundation, the same foundation with Sikorsky on helicopters. So really, we feel it's important to be a part of and develop the defense and aerospace ecosystem in India really out of opportunity, not obligation. And when we do that, it's very much part of our global supply chain. It's very much a part of a very strong and positive business case that I believe is good for Indian industry as well as it is for us, promoting our best capabilities and offering that to India. And I would add that, we're proud to be a part of Make in India, but it's really Make in India for the world. Because we're already doing that today on C-130s, delivering over 100 empennages to meet the global requirements, well over 100. Same on helicopter cabins, well over 154 cabins delivered on helicopters. And that foundation, sets the stage for what we can support as India is committed to the MH-60 Romeo, the most capable ASW platform from a helicopter and integral to the Indian Navy solution, working with other elements. So I just think that when you think about the ecosystem, there's a strong foundation and a strong future. But what I want to really underscore is that it's not just the big Indian private sector companies that we all know and love. It really flows down to tier 1, tier 2, 3 suppliers, which is so important, from a medium sized MSMEs and even engaging startups as we are with the Indian Innovation Growth Program. I think that makes it much more sustainable and capable in the future going forward. And it's not just delivering product at a platform level, subsystem and component level, but it's also ensuring that we've got partners like Mahindra Defense System working with us on the simulator training for the C-130J for the pilots, the Indian Air Force pilots. And so having it from an end-to-end solution, both from a product, but also sustainment and implementation and support of the customer, I think is critically important. So from my view, I think, there's a tremendously strong foundation, and it's inclusive of the private sector and the defense public sector units, whether it's HAL and BEL, really elevating that, growing that, diversifying that. And, frankly, we look forward to the DPP 2020 coming out, as was mentioned earlier by a couple of the other panelists. It really is refocusing with the increase in FDI allowed up to 74, additional acquisition models with Buy Global Make in India and the strategic Make in India model. I think that we've got a lot of avenues through which we can further grow the strategic relationship and leverage the industrial security annex that's going to let us get deeper from a technology cooperation.
Thanks, Bill. I want to put all three of you representatives of industry who've done a great job talking about what the foundations and the future, as Bill just said. I want to put all three of you on the spot really quickly with just two questions, and I'll go through each of you. So the two questions are, what's the next big thing? Where should we be going? I mean, should we be looking at more sensitive technologies, more radical innovation and collaboration on in domains where we don't do as much, in cyber or in space? Like, what's the next frontier in US-India cooperation? Or are we not necessarily there yet? That's question one. And question two is, what do you need from the government? So, like, there's a lot that obviously is working, but there's a lot that is potentially complicating also. I think the DPP 2020 looks kind of like a mix of good and bad, all of which will be navigated, I'm sure. But what would be one or two things that you'd want to see from both governments to help accelerate your ability to collaborate effectively? And Bill, since you were just speaking, I'm going to go back to you. I'm going to go in reverse order. So go.
Oh, no, thanks. Great. And I'll try to be brief. It ties into a conversation we had earlier today with the Chief of Defense Staff as part of an engagement with SIDM and CII. And I think I'm going to give you two answers to the next big frontier. One, I think there's a huge opportunity for us to work together on aerospace and defense grade raw materials. We've got increased indigenous content requirements as it relates to the DPP 2020, and we really need to be able to source, earlier and down to from a raw material perspective. And that requires, from a government perspective, I think, one, seeking a consortium approach, whether it's Lockheed Martin, Boeing, Mahindra Defense Systems, Tata. we have to look collectively as what's the requirement for aerospace and defense grade materials, and really shift and pivot to India versus, say, other countries that maybe have been an important source for that historically. And I'm talking titanium, aluminum, stretch forming capability. That requires investment and scale. And I think with a consortium and government support, I think what we enjoyed in the early days from a U.S. perspective is a key opportunity. And then second, I would say space cooperation. Building on the successes of the Aviation Cooperation Program, the model that I think was really hugely effective for industry to industry collaboration underneath a government to government partnership model. Do that the same as we have under the Defense Trade and Technology Initiative. Could we have a similar G2G type of construct where we as industry can partner with the likes of ISRO as well as the other private sector players? A lot of them are startups, and I think that's a great opportunity. Thank you.
Yeah, that's great. I'm glad to hear you say space. Absolutely. Ravi, what about from your standpoint in Mahindra? Next frontier, and what do you need from governments?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Just about.
How's it now? Yeah.
Good.
So I come back to one of the points that I have been talking about for the last 5 or 6 years. And it essentially comes down to the ISA. So as a background, in India, there are 0 cases of proliferation. There are 0 instances. We have an unblemished record, I think, for eternity now. Now, why I say this is, what I would like to see is that there is adequate information flow between the US side and Indian side on a real-time basis between the companies. I'm not talking of exchange of information between the navies and real-time information. I'm talking of information that I can get from my partner, which he can easily give to me without going to the US government or going to the US government quickly. There are 2 enablers for this. I think there has to be a security classification and security clearance from the Indian government side, and there has to be an equivalent from the US recognized here and vice versa. Because this sort of becomes an impediment. There are times at which there are competitors who come up with information much faster than we can sort of source and provide to the ministry here. So this is, I think, absolutely on top of the agenda as to major defense partners as we move forward.
That's great. Salil, same to you.
Yeah, absolutely. So on a couple things here. First, I want to follow up with what Bill was talking about with as it relates to opportunities to build capability in India. So he was talking largely about raw materials and some of the incentives that can come out of DPP to be able to do that. I want to broaden that and say, absolutely, if you look at the journey that we've been on here in India over the last 10 years, going from basic, working with suppliers and partners on basic parts all the way up to complex assemblies. And now, for example, the Apache fuselage in Hyderabad, that's a journey that requires building an ecosystem around a platform, right? So you can't really skip any steps. And that's a huge next step for India, is continuing to drive forward on making sure you have every element of that supplier ecosystem and partner ecosystem in place, if the goal ultimately is to build platforms in India. Right. And so that, we want to continue to drive that forward. So I would say that's number one in terms of a big thing. A second big thing I would say, and this doesn't always sound sexy, but it is support. And when I say support, I mean supporting all of the platforms for India from India. So what we've done over the last few years is set up Boeing Defense India to do just that. But I think that's going to be an expectation. And I think you've seen that with the government, with their focus on maintenance, repair, and overhaul, or MRO development in India. I think all of those things are going to have to come together, because these platforms are only good if they're ready and operationally ready to support the Indian warfighter. And that's the key mission for companies like ours. And I think that's going to be the key mission for any OEM that is doing business in India, is ensuring that all of those platforms are operationally ready. And as much of that work as possible is done leveraging the Indian capability and the Indian innovation that exists here.
You know, I wonder, Salil, do you think MRO capabilities in India could grow to support the Indian defense sector and beyond? Is that something that's worth envisioning?
Certainly, we think so. There's tremendous synergy opportunity in MRO because India is not only one of the largest, of course, one of the largest defense budgets in the world, but India within the next 5 or 6 years will be the third largest civil aviation market in the world as well, behind the US and China in some order. And so that means that when you pull that together, India is an opportunity unlike any other when it comes to MRO because of the scale that affords. And once you have that capability, you can apply it towards a vast array of components and airplanes, et cetera.
Yeah, that's totally
Vikram,
great.
could I add a comment on that?
Please.
Yeah, I think Salil brings up a great point. And when we think of, sustainment and MRO, it's about scale. Similar to what I mentioned on procurement of aerospace grade material, you're looking across the sector. And I think it's also generational. How do you sustain that for the long term? And so if you take historically and then looking forward, India's fighter requirements, you're starting to see tremendous scale to meet an important requirement in terms of filling a gap. And so thinking about that through generations of aircraft and sustaining that, I think is a really important thought. So, and as you seek to acquire the next fighter requirement to meet the medium role requirement, how do you look ahead to the 5th gen aircraft, and what country is best to potentially partner with, because you're talking about technology transfer and development of capabilities in the India ecosystem and how you extend that longer term. So I just think, as was stated up front from Joe, the foundational relationship that's established has really set us up to be in a great position as industry partners with our partners in India to really advance that and do it from all the way from raw material to delivering platforms and subsystems and sustaining them for decades to come.
Yeah, and Bill, so that's a really good point, especially about looking to the future. And so, Harinder, I actually want to pivot back to you with something out of this question, which was, he just mentioned 5th generation fighters and looking forward in the tech transfer issues. And obviously, one of the elephants in the room for the US-India defense cooperation is India-Russia defense cooperation. Russia is a key strategic partner for India. India's strategic systems are built on Russian technology. Those are systems that, if you're like us, you have for 50 plus years and continue to evolve. So it's not a place where there can be some sort of a break, and I don't think India wants any sort of a break. So how do you and how do Indians thinking about this relationship see that balance with India having this long-standing, deep defense relationship with Russia, and where it starts to rub up against the major defense partner potential?
Vikram, I would not agree that India does not want to disassociate with Russia. India cannot. I mean, you have to see the constraints under which we function. And this has been a platform, we cannot change our platforms overnight. And considering our huge developmental concerns and social concerns, we are still a developing economy. And what the West sees, the glitzy malls of Gurgaon and all, is just one part of India. So I think CATSA is going to continue to remain a very tricky issue, and we need to navigate. The US has been pretty understanding on the CATSA, and we do understand US constraints because of information sharing, and how do you share this information across 2 different kinds of platforms. You fully understand that. But I think rather than focus on the big things like the S-400s and all, I would like to look at, taking US-India defense cooperation further. I mean, there's a huge gap between the size of the Indian defense industry and the US defense industry. Lockheed Martin alone is about $70 billion, whereas in India, the entire defense industry is about $10 billion. It's fledgling, it is still coming up. So I think what the Indian government has done has created the IDEX, the Innovations for Defense Excellence. So I think these are the areas where we need to focus and look at what we can do in startups where India has the requisite capabilities, and also look at cutting-edge technologies which build into these bigger platforms. And I think that would also take care of, and also the other says that we need to sign the BECA, the last of the foundational agreements, which would give us greater opportunities, what Joe mentioned, for sharing information, not just on the China border, intelligence sharing, but even when I talk about the Quad, we need to strengthen the Five Eyes or expand the Five Eyes mechanism by involving India as a full and equal intelligence sharing partner in the Indo-Pacific. Now, that does not really involve anything to do with Russia. This becomes a direct US-India bilateral thing. So there is a lot which can be done bilaterally without bringing in, and as it is, we are weaning away from a lot of our dependence on Russia. We're doing a lot with the United States, which was unthinkable a few years back. And there are constraints of doing business with Russia, because here we are trying to involve our private sector, whereas Russia is still a state-owned enterprise model and our own business, and we are kind of adrift. So it worked very well as a government model. So I think we really need to look at these cutting-edge technologies, artificial intelligence, big data, and our latest Defense Expo in 2020 was focused on digital technologies. So I think if we can look in that area and evolve mechanisms for looking at computing, quantum computing, adaptive communication, space materials, re-entry vehicle sheets. Now, these are the kind of technologies, rather than the US becoming very, a closed door kind of a thing, because I think there has to be greater openness, and India can bring in a lot, and we can be equal partners over here till there is genuine trust, and then we see, these things evolving over a period of time. Because the big stuff will happen, but we need to have a strong foundational base.
I gotta say, that's a really good point, and I think what I see on both sides is an interest in proceeding on those lines. Keep building, and manage challenges, but keep building. And I'm personally working with several Indian startups, and I am blown away by the kind of innovation coming out of India right now. I think we're at the very beginning of the potential, and American companies and the U.S. government are well positioned, I think, to start taking advantage of those innovations in a way we haven't before. We don't have a lot of time left. I want to say to all of you, first, thank you, because everybody made concrete suggestions. There were actionable things in every single set of comments. And the challenge, Joe Felter, to you is to come up with something actionable to sort of close us out here. And I like that I get to turn back to you now as someone who is also advising the Defense Innovation Unit, including on the partnership with IDEX in India. So, Joe, I'm going over to you to close us out and give us a few other concrete things we can do. Thanks.
Well, Vikram, I don't want to disappoint on concrete, but I am going to talk a little bit broadly about something that's important to make all the concrete contributions and progress possible. And it was brought up earlier, the importance of trust. Vikram, I used to teach international relations at West Point and Stanford and Columbia. And in that theory, there's, if you have aligned interests, shared values, your natural partners, you're going to cooperate. But we know that doesn't happen unless people actually cooperate. It doesn't happen. So I think building that trust and creating those conditions through this major defense partnership of others, that's the way we're going to advance our interests. And both sides need to invest in that trust. I think in the context of today's discussion, the U.S., we need to, if we're going to say we're a major defense partner, let's put meat on the bones. Let's share our very best technology. And I've been in the room when we're talking about it, and it's subjective. The decision whether to share our best technology sometimes isn't cut and dry. It's like, is there that sense of trust? I know in the fighter competition, if you will, Shame on us if we don't put the very best technology on the American candidates, if you will, and making sure that that comes to the table as India makes its sovereign choices. And in taking that further, maybe a sensitive topic, but if you're a major defense partner, why not share our very best fighter technology, or at least create a path towards that? And that'll be an indicator of trust. And on the Indian side, hey, let's be honest, in defense, trade, technology, buying a platform, it's U.S. platforms, I'm a little biased. It's not only, in most cases, the best platform, and we've got some great representatives with those companies here, but it's an investment in a relationship. And again, investing in that relationship, it's a signal that, hey, this is the partnership we want to advance our common interests. We're not looking for an ally. We're looking for a partner that shares our interest and vision for this free and open region and sustaining this rules-based order. So those decisions all require trust. So we build this trust, which is, I think, very well articulated early on. That's how we're going to make that concrete progress. Without it, we're going to go nowhere. I mean, I work with George Shultz now at the Hoover Institution. He says coin is the trust of the realm, and that informed all his efforts as our Secretary of State. But that's what we need, and I think working together, people like on this panel and others are going to help build that trust, and we're going to make those concrete progress. But if we lose that trust, it'll be back to decades back. So let's maintain this trajectory and achieve this common vision that we have that's good for not just U.S.-India, but for the region and beyond.
Well, I couldn't agree more. I think that's a great way to close out this session. Thank you to all the panelists. Thank you, India Inc. and the U.S.-India Strategic Partnership Forum for making this discussion possible against the odds amid the COVID pandemic. We're going to keep going on, and we're going to get to new heights in meeting each other's common security objectives. We share so much. So I really want to thank everyone, and have a great rest of your day in whatever time zone you're in.
Thanks, Vikram.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Vikram.
Thanks, everyone.